morning. I'm Chief Annie Smith, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Chief of Investigations. This press conference is a follow-up to the conference we had yesterday regarding the incident that occurred at the Big Cash Pawn at 10369 Beach Boulevard. As you recall from yesterday's information that we provided to you, officers responded to the Big Cash Pawn and after being notified by the pawn shop that suspects that they had been looking for in a string of residential burglaries in the Zone 2 area were at the pawn shop. 4 officers responded to the pawn shop. Once they were inside, the male suspect and his wife, the female suspect, were inside the pawn shop. These officers that responded were aware that the suspect could possibly be armed and that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest. When they tried to take him into custody, he struggled with the officers and during the struggle produced a firearm. The officers took the suspect to the ground. During the struggle, while they were trying to get the firearm away from the suspect managed to fire one shot that struck the ground and ricocheted, injuring one of the officers, Officer J.C. Prentice, a 6.5-year veteran of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured, although, as you can imagine, during the struggle, the suspect having a gun, 4 officers struggling with the suspect trying to retrieve the gun, very easily could have gone much worse for the officers involved and for the citizens that were inside the pawn shop at the time. The firearm that was recovered is a 9mm black Beretta, had 9 rounds in the magazine, and 1 spent shell casing was recovered at the scene. The suspect, his name is Edward Jack Garvin. He is a white male, date of birth 5/30/67. He is a convicted felon and had no business carrying a firearm at all. In one of the recent residential burglaries, a firearm was also taken, and the female that was at the pawn shop at the time, who was the suspect's wife, was attempting to get a gun out of pawn that she had previously pawned. So there are potentially 3 firearms involved with these 3 individuals. Edward Garvin has been charged with 6 counts of attempted murder, 6 counts of aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer, and 6 counts of resisting arrest with violence, in addition to being charged with burglary and dealing in stolen property. He also had a warrant for his arrest for failure to appear on a felony introduction of contraband into a detention facility. So he has been charged with all of those crimes. Sherry Michelle Garvin, white female, 2/21/72, was inside the store at the time. She is the suspect's wife. She has also been charged with burglary and dealing in stolen property. The suspects have a 19-year-old daughter, Teal Marie Garvin, date of birth 11/5/93. She's 19. She has also been charged with burglary and dealing in stolen property. She also had an outstanding warrant for her arrest for a driver's license related charge. So she has been booked on those charges as well. Do you have any questions?
Dana Trini of the Times-Union. How were y'all, I wasn't there yesterday, how were y'all alerted to the fact that this fellow was there in the store at the...
The officers from the Zone 2 Residential Burglary Task Force have been following up on a string of burglaries that had occurred in their zone. Okay. One of the ways that we look for suspects is we search who is pawning a lot of items. They discovered through their investigation in coordination with the burglary detectives that these particular individuals had pawned more than 90 items in a very short period of time. When they started looking at what items were being pawned, a lot of the items that were being pawned were traced back to the burglaries that had occurred in the zone. Okay. So they had probable cause to arrest these individuals for the dealing in stolen property.
But how did they know that they were in the store? You said they converged.
Okay, I did cover that yesterday,
okay,
but no problem. They went around to the detectives and the officers went around to the pawn shops in the zone and asked for their assistance because they knew that these individuals were pawning stolen items. They provided the pawn shops with their information, the officers did, and asked if they were to see these suspects to please contact them. So that's what happened yesterday. The owner or the manager of the Big Cash Pawn recognized the individual and notified the officers, and that's why they responded so quickly.
How was the officer injured? It was a ricochet, but I mean, they didn't go to the hospital. Was it just a nick?
He did end up going to the hospital for x-rays to make sure that there were no bullet fragments in his arm. Fortunately, there weren't any. He was injured. He had some lacerations to his right forearm.
Any other questions?
How many burglaries are we talking about?
Just need your name and who you're with.
Al Campbell to JXC.
At this time, there are at least 3 that they're looking at, involving a number of pawns from those particular shops as well. Mostly jewelry items, but obviously identifiable items that they were able to trace back to the crimes themselves.
Jacob Long, First Coast News. Are you operating under the assumption that the husband, the wife, and the daughter were all kind of acting as like a family of criminals to pull out these burglaries?
They were all involved in the pawning of the items. I'm not 100% sure about how the burglaries were committed, but all 3 of them pawned items stolen from those burglaries.
And were they just after money?
I don't know what their motivation was, but the fact that the suspect had a gun on him while in the pawn shop, a gun was stolen from one of the burglaries, and the female at the scene yesterday was attempting to retrieve a gun that she had already pawned before. That's a lot of firearms for this small family. And the officers that responded, 4 of them responded, and it took all 4 of them to take this guy into custody. They struggled with this guy for quite some time before they were able to wrestle the gun away from him. And it's just by sheer luck and grace of God that no one was injured. The officers, fortunately, a couple of them were bruised up during the incident, and obviously Officer Prentice received injuries from the gunshot, but it could have gone, we're very fortunate at JSO. We haven't had any officers killed in the line of duty due to gunfire. And these guys were property crimes, which, sometimes the perception is that, it's just property crimes, that they're not dangerous criminals. But these individuals obviously had things on their mind. They had firearms, and Mr. Garvin was not afraid to use his firearm yesterday, even when confronted by 4 police officers.
So the whole reason they were at the pawn shop yesterday on Beach was to retrieve a gun?
Yes. The female was retrieving the gun. She is not a convicted felon, so she could have legally done so. He, however, even in the store and was armed with a gun, had no business having a firearm.
Danny Attorney, just because to bring a gun into a store like a pawn shop or a Walmart or something, do you have to, if you can legally have it, it can't be concealed? I mean, for example, somebody wanted to go and pawn a gun. If they brought it in, would they have to carry it openly? Or could
You can't openly carry a firearm,
okay.
even if you have a concealed firearms permit. His was underneath his T-shirt. He was wearing his T-shirt outside of his pants. However, when we reviewed the video, you can clearly see the butt of the gun on his right side.
But if you were to pawn a gun, how would you take it into the store to pawn?
You would need to bring it in unloaded.
Unloaded.
Even if you were to register a gun here, we have clear warning signs on the front of our doors that you don't ever bring a loaded firearm into.
But you could bring an unloaded gun into a store.
If you need to pawn it, yes.
If you need
Not if you're a convicted felon. You shouldn't have your hands on a gun at all.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.